This is part 1 of my series where I teach you exactly how to make this quilt step by step. And in this video, all I'm going to be talking about is cutting our pieces. Check out the other videos in my playlist for how much fabric you need. Before beginning cutting, I do recommend ironing out all of your fat quarters and using starch spray. You'll see here the starch makes the fabric a little stiffer, and this will make it easier to work with, and we will be cutting on the bias for these blocks. So the starch will also help with that. We will be cutting all of the fat quarters exactly the same. For this part of the process, I actually use a few different types of rulers, but if you're brand new and you don't want to go out and purchase all these, I would suggest at least having one of these long acrylic rulers. Each fat quarter will be cut exactly the same. So here I'm just going to show you one, and then you'll just repeat the process with all of your fat quarters. As I begin cutting here, the shorter side or the 18-inch side of the fat quarter is on the bottom, and then the 20 to 22-inch side is on the, sides. Then I go ahead and square this off because a lot of the times these are not perfectly cut square. I did this by lining up one of the lines on my ruler with the top end of my fat quarter or the bottom, wherever the selvage is usually where I pick. And then I cut off the side so that the corner is squared up. Then I kind of rotated it because I'm going to start cutting from that square corner that I just made. The first cut I'm going to make here is going to be 3.5 inches in, and I just do the entire length of my fat quarter here. Then I move that over to the side a little bit. Next, we're going to be doing 4.25 inch, and we're just doing the same thing. I like having a long ruler like this because then I match up that 4.25 along multiple points to make sure that it is straight. Then I move that strip and my 3.5 inch strip over to the side and rotate the remaining fabric here. I had some selvage fabric, so I trimmed that off. And then next I cut out a 7 3/4 inch square. I just cut along the entire edge 7 3/4 inch instead of trying to make 2 cuts right away. I just prefer to do it this way. If you wanted, you could line your ruler up this way instead right away and make the 2 cuts. But I cut like this, and then I moved my ruler and the piece around and then made another cut to get my 7 3/4 inch square. Then that fabric to the right after I cut is just scrap. Make sure to save these for other small projects. And then from the remaining fabric, you'll need a 6.5 inch square. Again, I cut 6.5 inches all the way along the fabric and then make a second cut. And then anything after this is scrap. So we do have quite a bit of scrap. Please don't throw it away. Please save it for other small projects or maybe making a scrappy quilt later on. So far, you should have a 7 3/4 inch square, a 6.5 inch square, and then a 4.25 inch strip and a 3.5 inch strip. I bring the strips back, and now I'm going to cut squares. You will need 4 4.25 inch squares. Again, I'm trimming off the selvage end here. If you're unsure what that means, the selvage end is like that tightly woven edge of the fabric that keeps it from fraying. Usually there's like little holes in it. I always trim that off. I do not incorporate that into the project. And like I said, you're going to cut 4 squares out of this, so they should each be 4.25 inch. And then you will have a little bit of scrap left, so throw that with the rest of your scraps. Next, we're going to do the same thing with that 3.5 inch strip. You're going to have 4 3.5 inch squares. Cut these and then put all of your cut fabric together, and you should end up with 4 3.5 inch squares, 4 4.25 inch squares, 1 6.5 inch square, and 1 7 3/4 inch square. Then repeat this process with all 12 of your fat quarters. Each of your fat quarters will make up 1 star part of a block and 1 background part of a block. So for each 2 fat quarters, you have 2 full quilt blocks. I paired up all my fat quarters ahead of time so that I knew which fabrics I wanted to go with the other. Now tomorrow we will start sewing and putting these blocks together.